The red live icon blinked at the top of her phone. Like a warning, she pretended not to see. She adjusted the angle slightly, tilting the camera away from the left side of her face. The ring light washed her skin in artificial warmth, softening edges, blurring shadows, but not enough. Never enough. She smiled anyway, the practiced smile that had learned how to exist without joy. "Hey, guys," she said, voice light, almost cheerful. I know, late stream tonight." The comments rolled in immediately. Hearts, fire emojis, a few familiar usernames welcoming her back. This was her routine. Midnight live streams had become her safest habit. Thousands of eyes felt less dangerous than the silence behind her walls. She laughed at something someone typed, nodding along as if everything was fine, as if her hands weren't shaking just outside the frame. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. No television, no footsteps, just the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of her own breathing, slightly too fast. Every few seconds, her eyes flicked toward the hallway behind her, the dark stretch leading to the bedroom door. "Sorry if I'm a little off tonight," she said quickly, filling the space. "Long day, you know how it is." A comment popped up, "Are you okay?" She didn't read it out loud. Instead, she reached for her mug, careful to keep her wrist turned inward. The bruise there was old but stubborn, yellowing at the edges like it refused to heal on principle. She lifted the mug with both hands, blocking the view. "I'm great," she insisted, smiling harder. "Just tired." Another comment appeared. Then another. "Your eye looks swollen. Blink twice if you need help. Girl, who's in the other room?" Her smile faltered for half a second, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. She wasn't, but the internet always was. She shifted in her chair, the legs scraping softly against the floor. The sound echoed louder than it should have. She swallowed. "You guys are wild tonight," she joked, forcing a laugh. "I swear, you all think you're detectives." From somewhere deeper in the apartment came a noise. A dull thud, not loud, just enough. Her body reacted before her mind did. Her shoulders tensed. Her breath caught. The chat exploded. "What was that? That didn't sound normal." "Go check on that," she froze, eyes locked on the screen. For a moment, she considered ending the live stream, just tapping the button, just making it stop. Instead, she shook her head. "Probably my neighbor," she said too quickly. "These walls are thin." But her voice had changed. The pitch was higher now, the rhythm uneven. She kept talking. About nothing, about everything. Words tumbling over each other to drown out the fear crawling up her spine. Her phone buzzed. A message, not from the chat. Her eyes dropped instinctively. The color drained from her face. "Why are you live? I told you not to talk about us." She looked up sharply, staring past the camera toward the hallway. The bedroom door was still closed. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. "I'm just hanging out," she said aloud, though no one had asked. "It's nothing serious." The comments were relentless now. She looked scared. "End the stream and call someone. Please tell me you're safe." Her lips parted. For a moment, it looked like she might say something real, something honest. Then footsteps sounded in the hall. Slow, deliberate. Her eyes widened just a fraction. She didn't turn around. She didn't have to. "Guys," she whispered, too soft for anyone to hear clearly. "I should probably." The door behind her creaked open. The screen shook as her phone slipped slightly in its stand. A shadow crossed the wall. The chat erupted into all caps. "Hey!" a voice said from off camera. Calm, controlled. "You still on that thing?" She forced herself to smile again, even as her hands trembled openly now. "Yeah," she said, "just for a minute." The live stream didn't end. Not yet. The live stream ended the way most disasters do, not with clarity, but with confusion. One moment, the chat was screaming in capital letters, hearts in panic, colliding at the speed of the internet. The next, the screen went black. Live ended. No goodbye. No explanation. Just silence. For a few hours, nothing happened. Then the clips began to spread. Someone had screen recorded the last 2 minutes. Another slowed the footage down, circling the tremor in her hands, The way her eyes tracked the shadow behind her. TikTok stitched it, Reddit dissected it, Twitter renamed it. By morning, her face was everywhere. Pause mid-smile, fear caught between frames. That wasn't acting. You don't flinch like that unless you're scared. I've been there. She needs help. She didn't see any of it at first. She lay awake on the edge of the bed, staring at the ceiling, phone face down beside her like a landmine. Her body still felt wired, adrenaline refusing to release its grip. Every sound, the pipes, the passing cars, even her own breath, made her tense. "You embarrass me," he had said after the stream ended. Not yelling, never yelling. His voice had been calm, precise, far more dangerous than rage. "I didn't say anything," she whispered back. That was the truth, and it didn't matter. Now, as morning light crept through the blinds, her phone buzzed relentlessly. Notifications stacked faster than she could read them. Missed calls, messages from numbers she hadn't saved. Some kind, some cruel. She finally turned the phone over. The first thing she saw wasn't concern. It was accusation. "Why would you lie like that? You're ruining his life." Attention seeker. Her stomach twisted. She scrolled faster, breath shallow. Then she saw the others. I saw the fear in her eyes. "If you need help, we're here." That pause before you answered him. That's survival. She dropped the phone onto the bed like it had burned her. In the kitchen, he moved casually, humming as he poured coffee. Normal. Always normal. The kind of normal that made her doubt herself. "You see what you caused?" he asked without looking at her. "People are talking." "I didn't meaning doesn't matter," he cut in softly. "Perception does." She nodded, instinctively shrinking. The internet had noticed what she'd spent years convincing herself wasn't real. And somehow, that terrified her more than anything else. By noon, her username was trending. A former friend, someone she hadn't spoken to in over a year, left a comment beneath one of the viral clips. "I tried to help her once." She stopped answering. The lies she'd built her life on began to crack. Strangers stitched her video with their own stories, their own bruises, their own warnings. They spoke directly to her through the screen, voices overlapping like a chorus she couldn't silence. They always say it's nothing. They always protect them. Until they can't. She sat on the bathroom floor, phone pressed to her chest, shaking. For the first time, she wondered if the comments weren't exaggerating. If maybe, just maybe, they were telling the truth she'd been too afraid to say herself. And somewhere behind her, a door clicked shut. The click of the door wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. She felt in her chest before her ears registered the sound. A small, precise noise that sealed the apartment into something else entirely. Not a home, a container. He leaned against the doorframe of the bathroom, arms crossed, posture relaxed. To anyone else, he might have looked patient. Concerned, even, that was his gift, appearing reasonable while everything underneath sharpened. "You okay in there?" he asked. She stayed seated on the cold tile, knees pulled tight to her chest. The phone was still in her hand, screen glowing faintly with notifications she hadn't opened. She nodded before realizing he couldn't see her. "Yeah," she said, then louder, "I'm fine." He smiled just a little. "You've been in here a while." "I needed a minute." "A minute from what?" His voice remained calm, curious, a trap disguised as care. She didn't answer. Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. She could hear the faint buzz of her phone again. Another message, another stranger reaching through the screen. He stepped closer. "You know," he said gently, "people online don't know you. They don't know us." Us. The word wrapped around her throat like a rope. "They take things out of context," he continued. "They project their own damage. You can't let them get in your head." She finally looked up at him. His eyes were steady, searching her face for something, resistance, maybe, or permission. "I didn't say anything," she repeated. "I swear." "I know." He crouched down in front of her, lowering himself to her level. "That's what scared me." Her stomach dropped. "You didn't have to," he said softly. They saw what they wanted to see. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. She flinched before she could stop herself. The movement was small, instinctive, and fatal. His hand froze midair. "There," he said quietly. "That." "I'm just tired," she rushed. "I didn't sleep." He stood abruptly, the tenderness evaporating. "You're always tired lately." The bathroom felt smaller now, the walls closer, the door behind him suddenly very far away. "You know how this looks, right?" he said, pacing. "After everything I've done for you?" Guilt bloomed on command, familiar and overwhelming. "I didn't mean to make you look bad," she said. The words came easily, too easily. He stopped and turned to her. "So you admit it?" Her mouth opened, closed. She hadn't meant that. She never meant that. "I mean, do you know what happens to men who get accused online?" He interrupted. "Careers end. Lives end. Even when it's not true." Her chest tightened. She nodded, tears blurring her vision. "I'd never do that to you," she said quickly. "I love you." The room softened at the word. He exhaled, tension releasing as if she'd passed some invisible test. "I know you do," he said, kneeling again. This time, she didn't pull away when he touched her arm. "That's why I need you to trust me." Trust. Another word that used to mean safety. He picked up her phone from the floor, glancing at the screen. His jaw tightened. "You should stop reading this stuff," he said. "It's poison." He held the phone out to her, waiting. She hesitated only a second before taking it, before locking it, before choosing him over the noise. That was the first lie she told herself that day, and it wouldn't be the last. She told herself it hadn't always been like this. That was the lie, the first one that mattered. Later, when everything was reduced to timelines and warning signs, people would ask how it started. They always did, as if abuse arrived announcing itself, as if it didn't wear charm like a disguise. In the beginning, he had been attentive in a way that felt flattering, almost intoxicating. He remembered the smallest details, how she liked her coffee, the songs that made her cry for no clear reason. When she spoke, he listened like her words were instructions for loving her properly. "You've never had anyone really take care of you," he'd said once, brushing his thumb across her knuckles. It hadn't felt like an accusation then. It felt like understanding. She had mistaken intensity for intimacy. The first time he raised his voice, it was because he was scared. That's how she framed it in her mind. They were crossing the street, and she'd stepped forward without looking. His hand snapped around her wrist, pulling her back hard enough to sting. "What were you thinking?" he'd shouted. People had turned to look. Her face burned with embarrassment. "I'm sorry," she'd said immediately. Reflexively, he'd gone quiet after that, jaw clenched, eyes distant. Minutes passed before he spoke again. "I just can't lose you," he said, voice breaking in a way that felt real. "I panicked." She'd nodded, rubbing her wrist, already rewriting the moment. Fear, not anger. Love, not control. That night, he brought flowers. She learned the pattern slowly, without realizing she was learning anything at all. Every sharp edge was followed by softness. Every accusation wrapped in reassurance. He didn't tell her what to do. He explained why it was better if she didn't. "You don't need those friends," he'd say casually. "They don't really get you." At first, she pushed back, laughed it off. But eventually, calls went unanswered. Invitations expired without reply. It was easier to stay and then explain why he didn't like her going out alone anymore. One friend had noticed. Just one. "You okay?" she'd asked over coffee, eyes lingering too long on the faint discoloration beneath her sleeve. "You seem smaller." "I'm happy," she'd replied too quickly. The friend hadn't smiled back. "Just, if anything ever feels wrong," she never let her finish. When that friend stopped calling, she told herself it was mutual. People grow apart. That's normal. What wasn't normal was how carefully she chose her words at home, how she gauged his mood before speaking, how silence felt safer than honesty. But she didn't call it fear. She called it love. Even now, sitting alone with her phone buzzing endlessly in her hand, she wanted to believe that version of the story, that the internet had it wrong, that strangers were projecting their own trauma onto her life. He'd said so himself. They don't know us. And that was true. They didn't know the good days. The apologies whispered into her hair. The way he could be gentle, thoughtful, devastated by the idea of losing her. She ignored the other truth, that she had been devastated long before the live stream ever began. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a name appeared she hadn't seen in months. The friend. I saw the video. The message read, "Please tell me you're okay." Her chest tightened. She stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard. For a moment, she considered telling the truth, just a little of it, enough to be real. From the other room, she heard her moving, a drawer opening, closing. She locked the phone and set it face down on the table. "I'm fine," she whispered to no one. The lies settled easily in her mouth, and behind closed doors, it continued to grow. Silence stopped feeling neutral the day she realized it had a shape. It sat between them at the dinner table, heavy and deliberate, filling the spaces where conversation used to live. He scrolled through his phone while she pushed food around her plate, appetite dulled by the constant low-grade panic humming beneath her skin. "You've been quiet," he said without looking up. "I'm just tired," she replied. It had become her most useful sentence. He hummed, unconvinced. "You know silence makes people suspicious." The words landed softly, but the message was clear. Speak carefully or not at all. Later that night, she lay awake beside him, staring into the dark. His breathing was slow and even, the practiced calm of someone who slept easily. She envied that. Her own thoughts raced, replaying comments, messages, memories she'd buried too deep to reach without pain. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She froze. Another message from a friend. "You don't have to explain everything. Just tell me if you're safe." Safe. The word felt foreign, almost abstract. She imagined replying. Just one word. No. The thought made her chest ache with a strange mix of relief and terror. Beside her, he shifted in his sleep, arm draping possessively across her waist. The weight of it anchored her in place. She turned the phone face down. The next morning, he was attentive. Too attentive. He made coffee, kissed her forehead, asked about her plans for the day. "Maybe you should stay off social media for a bit," he suggested lightly. "Let things cool down." She nodded. Of course. It made sense. Everything he said always did. But even offline, the noise followed her. She saw it in the way strangers glanced at her in public, as if they recognized her. In the way her phone continued to vibrate with notifications she pretended not to see. The world had noticed what she tried so hard to hide, and now it wouldn't look away. That afternoon, she overheard him on the phone. His voice was low, controlled, filtered through the bathroom door. "I don't know how this got so blown out of proportion," he said. A pause. "Yeah, I'm handling it." Her stomach tightened. That night, the question she'd been avoiding finally surfaced. "What if they're right?" she asked quietly. He looked up from the couch, expression carefully neutral. "Who?" "The comments," she said. "What if people saw something I didn't?" He studied her for a long moment. Too long. "Are you saying I hurt you?" he asked calmly. The room seemed to tilt. "No," she said immediately. Too quickly. "I'm just saying, maybe it looked bad." He exhaled slowly, as if steadying himself. "You know how dangerous that kind of thinking is." "I didn't mean, you know what happens when lies get out of control?" he continued, voice still even. "They ruin people. Families. You don't want that on your conscience." The guilt came rushing in, familiar and crushing. "I don't," she whispered. "Good," he said, smiling gently. Then we're on the same side. That night, she cried silently in the bathroom, hands pressed over her mouth to keep from making a sound. For the first time, the truth pressed against her from inside, demanding space. She wasn't just protecting him anymore. She was protecting the lie. And every time she stayed quiet, every time she chose comfort over honesty, the lie grew stronger, more convincing, more dangerous. She dried her face, staring at her reflection, at the woman who had learned how to disappear without leaving the room. Back in the bedroom, her phone lay where she'd left it. This time, she picked it up, She didn't open the messages. She didn't respond. Instead, she scrolled backward through old texts, missed calls, fragment of arguments she'd brushed aside. She hesitated, then pressed a button. Screenshot. The sound was barely audible. A small, sharp click. Her heart pounded. She took another. And another. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was remembering. And somewhere, just beyond the silence she'd built her life around, consequences were beginning to form. The screenshots multiplied quietly, like a secret growing teeth. At first, she told herself she was only organizing her thoughts. Nothing more. Just proof for herself, a way to make sense of what had happened, and when. Dates. Times. Messages that shifted tone mid-sentence. Apologies that arrived seconds after insults, stacked so neatly they almost looked intentional. She didn't store them in a folder. That felt too deliberate, too much like admitting what they were. Instead, they lived scattered through her phone, buried among selfies and grocery lists and screenshots of harmless things. A digital camouflage. Her heart raced every time she pressed buttons. Volume down, power, flinching at the faint click. Each capture felt like crossing a line she wouldn't be able to uncross. Why are you making me do this? You know how you get when you don't listen. I wouldn't have to yell if you'd stop pushing me. Reading the words outside the moment stripped them of their excuses. On the screen, they looked colder, calculated, permanent, forever, she thought, swallowing hard. He noticed a change before she did. You're on your phone a lot, he said one evening, voice casual, eyes sharp. Everything okay? She forced a shrug, just trying to catch up. He nodded, but the air shifted. The room felt tighter, like it was holding its breath. Later, when she went to shower, she locked the bathroom door, a habit she hadn't needed before. Steam filled the room as she sat on the edge of the tub, scrolling through her screenshots with shaking hands. That was when she saw it, a voicemail she hadn't listened to, from an unknown number, time-stamped that morning. She hesitated, then pressed play. Hi, a woman's voice said, professional but not unkind. This is Officer Ramirez with the department. We're following up on a wellness concern that was brought to our attention. Please give us a call back when you can. Her blood went cold. Wellness concern. The phrase echoed in her head, clinical and distant. Someone had called. Someone had watched the live stream and decided it was more than entertainment. She ended the message and stared at the screen, pulse pounding. Fear rushed in first. What would he do if he found out? Followed closely by something else. Something fragile and unfamiliar. Relief. The shower never turned on. She dried her face mechanically, hiding the phone back where it belonged. When she stepped out, he was waiting in the living room. Everything okay? He asked. Yeah, she said. The lie tasted different now. Thinner. That night, she barely slept. Every creak of the apartment sounded like footsteps. Every vibration of her phone sent her heart into her throat. She kept imagining his hand reaching for it, his eyes scanning the screen, the careful calm evaporating. In the early hours of the morning, she checked her messages again. The friend had written back, I know you're scared, but screenshots don't lie. Neither do patterns. Please talk to someone. She stared at the words until they blurred. By morning, the voicemail was gone. Deleted. She hadn't done it. Panic bloomed fast and hot. She searched through her call history, her deleted messages, her voicemail folder. Nothing. The absence felt loud. At breakfast, he kissed her cheek, poured her coffee, smiled like everything was normal. Did you sleep? He asked. Not really. You worry too much, he said gently. That's your problem. She nodded, fingers tightening around the mug. Later that afternoon, there was a knock at the door. 3 sharp raps. He stiffened, just for a moment. I'll get it, he said, already standing. She followed him anyway, heart hammering so hard she was sure they could hear it through the walls. When the door opened, a uniform stood on the other side. Good afternoon, the officer said, eyes flicking briefly to her. We just want to ask a few questions. The room felt suddenly very small. And for the first time, the screenshots didn't feel like a secret anymore. They felt like a countdown. The officers left with polite smiles and unanswered questions. Routine check, they called it. A misunderstanding. He thanked them for their time, his voice steady, welcoming. So convincing it made her feel foolish for ever doubting him. She stood just behind his shoulder, hands folded, nodding when expected, silent when it mattered. When the door closed, the apartment exhaled. Then it held its breath. He didn't speak right away. He walked to the kitchen, set the coffee mug in the sink with deliberate care, rinsed it clean. The quiet stretched thin, brittle. "Who called them?" he asked finally. She felt the question land in her spine. "I don't know," she said. It was the truth, but it didn't help. He turned to face her. "Someone thought you needed help." Her mouth opened, closed. The screenshots burned in her pocket, like a confession she couldn't make. "You've been acting strange," he continued. "Distracted. Secretive. I'm allowed to have thoughts," she said, surprising herself. His eyebrows lifted slightly. "Not anger, interest. Thoughts turn into stories," he said. "Stories turn into lies." The room felt wrong now. Tilted. She took a step back, then another. "I didn't tell anyone anything," she said. "I swear." "I know," he replied. "But you almost did." Something snapped. Not loudly, not cleanly. Just enough. "I can't keep pretending," she said, voice shaking. "They saw it. Everyone saw it." "Saw what?" His tone hardened. "You smiling at a camera?" "You," she said. "What you do." The silence that followed was deafening. "You're confused," he said slowly. "You let strangers get inside your head." She shook her head, tears spilling now. "I'm scared." The word hung between them, raw and undeniable. His jaw tightened. "Scared of me?" She didn't answer. That was answer enough. He took a step forward. She backed away, reaching blindly for the counter behind her. Her hand brushed her phone. Instinctively, she grabbed it. "Don't," he warned. Her fingers slipped. The screen lit up, red. Live, neither of them realized it at first. They were too focused on each other, on the years of silence cracking open all at once. "You're ruining everything," he said, voice raised now. "After all I've done for you." "I didn't ask for this," she cried. "I just wanted you to stop." "Stop what?" he snapped. "Holding you together?" The comments poured in unseen, frantic, and terrified. "She's live. Call the police. Please get out." The phone slipped from her hand. Clattering onto the floor, camera tilted toward the ceiling. Voices echoed, distorted. "Look at me," he said sharply. A thud, a gasp, then chaos. Scraping furniture, a sharp cry, something breaking. The screen shook violently before going still, staring at nothing. The live stream cut out seconds later. Across the city, thousands of viewers sat frozen, staring at black screens and racing hearts. Some dialed emergency numbers. Some recorded. Some prayed they'd misunderstood what they'd heard. Inside the apartment, time collapsed. When the noise stopped, the silence that followed was different from all the others. It wasn't holding its breath anymore. It was final. And when morning came, the truth would no longer belong to either of them. Morning arrived without mercy. Sirens cut to the quiet just after sunrise, sharp and insistent, echoing off the concrete like accusations. Red and blue light bled through the apartment windows, staining the walls in colors that didn't belong there. Neighbors gathered in the hallway, whispering, phones raised, curiosity thinly disguised as concern. The door stood open now. Inside, the air smelled wrong, metallic and stale, heavy with something that had no name but carried weight. Officers moved carefully, methodically, stepping around overturned furniture and shattered glass as if the room itself were evidence of a long-held secret finally collapsing. He lay on the floor of the living room. Still, the man who had once filled every corner of the apartment with his presence now took up so little space. His body was angled unnaturally, one arm twisted beneath him, eyes half open and unseeing. The control he wielded so effortlessly in life had abandoned him in death. She sat on the edge of the bedroom, wrapped in a blanket that wasn't hers, hands shaking despite the warmth. An EMT knelt in front of her, speaking softly, asking questions she answered automatically. "What's your name? Are you hurt? Do you know what day it is?" Her answers came slow, detached, as if someone else were speaking for her. She stared at a crack in the wall, counting her breaths. An officer approached, notebook in hand. "Can you tell us what happened?" She swallowed. Her mouth felt dry, her tongue heavy. "There was an argument," she said. "It got out of control." That was all she could manage. Across the room, another officer whispered into a radio. A supervisor arrived. Then another. The apartment filled with uniforms, cameras, authority. Outside, the crowd grew. Someone had recognized the address. The live stream had already been shared again, this time with speculation layered on top of fear. Headlines formed faster than facts. TikTok live stream ends in tragedy. Influencer's partner found dead after viral video. Her phone buzzed nonstop, where it lay sealed in an evidence bag on the table. She didn't ask for it back. At the station, the lights were too bright. The chair was too hard. The questions came in circles. Did he threaten you? Did you fear for your life? Were there weapons in the apartment? She answered when she could. When she couldn't, she stared at the table until the words returned. They showed her the screenshots. Her screenshots. Printed now. Labeled. Stripped of context but heavy with implication. "These yours?" the detective asked gently. She nodded. For the first time, no one told her she was overreacting. When they finally let her go, the sky was already dark again. She stepped outside into a crowd she hadn't known was waiting. Cameras flashed. Someone shouted her name. She flinched, shrinking inward. A reporter called out, "Do you feel responsible?" The question hit harder than any accusation. She said nothing. That night, alone in a borrowed room, she lay awake listening to the echo of a door closing in her mind. The moment that had changed everything. The moment the truth escaped without permission. He was gone. She was still here. And somewhere between those two facts, a story was already being written. One that would decide whether she was a victim who survived or a woman who went too far. By morning, the internet would choose for her, and the next battle would begin. The internet reached its verdict long before the court ever did. By the second day, her name was no longer necessary. She was the woman from the live stream, a symbol, a headline, a vessel for everyone else's anger, fear, and unresolved trauma. Clips of the video played on loop across platforms, slowed down, zoomed in, dissected. Her trembling hands became evidence. Her silence became suspicion. Her survival became a question mark people felt entitled to interrogate. Some called her brave. Others called her calculated. She knew exactly what she was doing. If she was really afraid, why didn't she leave? Funny how she went live right before he died. She stopped reading after someone posted her address. The legal process moved slowly, methodically, like it existed in a different universe than the one screaming outside her door. Attorneys spoke in careful language. Detectives avoided opinions. Everything was alleged, pending under review. Online, there was no such restraint. Every expression she made outside the courthouse was analyzed. When she didn't cry, she was cold. When she did, she was manipulative. She learned quickly that there was no correct way to look like a victim. At night, she replayed the same question over and over. What if I had ended the live stream sooner? What if I had left years ago? What if I hadn't fought back? The comments answered for her, brutally and without mercy. You wanted attention. You stayed. That's on you. Abuse doesn't make you innocent. In quieter corners of the internet, other voices tried to push back. Survivors shared their stories, recognizing the fear in her eyes, the freeze response in her body. I didn't leave either. One post read, and I almost didn't make it. She saved that one. In court, the evidence told a story that felt both familiar and foreign. The screenshots appeared again, this time projected onto a screen large enough for strangers to study the worst moments of her life. Messages stripped of tone, apologies without bruises, threats softened by legal language. The defense painted him as volatile, impulsive, provoked. The prosecution painted her as unreliable, emotional, inconsistent. She sat very still, hands folded in her lap, listening to two sides argue over a life she had lived in fragments. When she testified, her voice shook, but she didn't break. "I was afraid," she said simply, "and I didn't know how to leave." The courtroom was silent. For a moment, even the internet seemed to pause. Then the hot takes resumed. That's not an excuse. She's rewriting history. Fear doesn't justify violence. She learned that justice and truth were not the same thing. Justice needed proof, timeline, certainty. Truth lived in her body, in the way she still flinched at sudden noises. In the night, she woke up gasping for air. Outside the courthouse, a reporter shouted, "Do you regret going live?" She stopped walking. For the first time, she looked directly at the cameras. "I regret not being believed sooner," she said. The clip went viral within the hour. By the time closing arguments approached, the public had already decided what they wanted her to be. Monster, martyr, lesson. Very few saw her as human. On the eve of the verdict, she sat alone in a small room, staring at her hands. The same hands that had once shaken on camera. The same hands now labeled dangerous. Tomorrow, the court would speak. But she already knew the hardest truth, the one no verdict could touch. There were things the courtroom would never hear. And in the silence between the law and her life, she would have to learn how to carry them alone. The verdict came down on a Tuesday afternoon, delivered in a voice so steady it felt almost cruel. She stood when instructed, hands clasped tightly in front of her, nails pressing crescents into her palms. Around her, the courtroom breathed as one organism. Lawyers poised, spectators leaning forward, cameras banned but imagination sharp. The words landed. Legal. Final. Not guilty. A sound escaped her throat before she could stop it. Not relief, not joy, but something closer to release. Like a breath she'd been holding for years without realizing it. Behind her, someone scoffed. Outside, the reaction detonated instantly. Headlines updated within seconds, spinning the verdict into whatever shape best fit the outrage of the hour. She walks free. Justice failed. Another man dead. Another woman excused. The court had spoken, but it hadn't explained anything. It never could. In the quiet room where they sent her afterward, her lawyer talked about next steps, statements, privacy, safety precautions. The words washed over her, distant and unimportant. Her body felt hollow, as if the trial had scooped something out of her and forgotten to put anything back. "You're free to go," someone said. Free. The word felt heavy in her mouth. What the court hadn't heard lived in the spaces between testimony, in the pauses she'd learned to use instead of objections, in the way her heart still raced when a door closed too loudly. In the nights, she woke reaching for a phone that was no longer hers. They hadn't heard how love had been rationed, how affection became currency, how apologies could feel like oxygen when you've been held underwater long enough. They hadn't heard the calculations she made every day. What version of herself would keep the peace? Which words would defuse instead of detonate? How silence wasn't passive, but strategic. How staying alive sometimes meant disappearing piece by piece. None of that fit neatly into evidence. That evening, she sat alone in a borrowed apartment, watching the city lights flicker on one by one. The world looked unchanged and different. Somewhere, people were arguing about her online, confident in their certainty. Her phone, new, untracked, buzzed. A message from a friend. "I'm glad you survived." She stared at the words for a long time. Survived. Not won. Not escaped. Just survived. She typed back slowly. "I don't know what comes next." The response came quickly. "Neither did I. But it's quieter." Eventually, later, she stood in the shower, letting the water run, until her skin flushed pink. She pressed her forehead against the tile and cried. Not for him, not for the trial, but for the woman she'd been before fear had rearranged her life. That woman was gone. The court couldn't bring her back. When the water turned cold, she shut it off and wrapped herself in a towel, catching her reflection in the fog mirror. She looked older, tired, real. That night, she dreamed of the live stream, Not the chaos, but the moment before. The red live icon blinking patiently, waiting for her to decide whether to be seen. She woke just before dawn with her heart pounding. The internet would never forget her. The story would follow her in fragments, in whispers, in search results. She could fight it, or she could step away. By morning, she made a decision. She opened her laptop, logged into accounts she hadn't touched since the night everything changed, and began to delete. Videos first, then posts, then the username itself. A warning popped up. This action cannot be undone. She clicked confirm. When it was over, the silence felt different. Not empty, intentional. Outside, the day went on. Inside, for the first time, she wasn't waiting for someone else to define what happened to her. She didn't know who she would become next, but she knew one thing for certain. This time, when the stream ended, she would be the one who chose what came after. The first thing she noticed was how quiet the world became when no one was watching. There was no buzzing phone on the nightstand, no constant pull to check notifications, no strangers narrating her existence back to her in fragments and opinions. The silence wasn't gentle. It was disorienting, like stepping off a moving train and realizing your body still expected motion. She moved to a small town where no one recognized her face, and her name meant nothing. She paid in cash at the grocery store. She avoided eye contact out of habit, then slowly realized she didn't have to anymore. No one here knew what she had survived. No one demanded an explanation. At night, the memories still came. They arrived without warning. In the slam of a car door and the tone of a man's voice raised slightly too high, in the glow of a red light reflected on a window. Sometimes she woke up convinced she'd forgotten to end a live stream, heart racing as she reached for a phone that no longer existed. She learned that survival didn't look like triumph. It looked like therapy appointments scribbled into a paper calendar, like learning how to sit with discomfort instead of explaining it away, like understanding that some days would feel heavier than others for no reason at all. She found a job that didn't ask questions. She made small talk with co-workers about weather and television shows she didn't really watch. Normalcy became something she practiced, not something she assumed. Once at a cafe, she overheard two women talking about a true crime video. "Did you see that case of the live stream?" One asked. "It was wild." Her stomach tightened. "I don't know," the other replied. Everyone online thought they knew what happened, but none of us were there. She stared down into her coffee until the shaking passed. At home, she kept one thing she almost threw away, a printed screenshot, folded and tucked into a drawer. Not the worst message, not the most incriminating, just one where the cruelty was undeniable, stripped of tone and excuses. She didn't look at it often. It wasn't proof for anyone else anymore. It was proof for herself in moments when doubt crept back in and whispered that maybe she'd imagined it all. Healing, she learned, wasn't linear. Some days she felt strong, grounded, even hopeful. Other days, guilt pressed in without warning. Guilt for surviving, for being believed too late, for the life that had ended even though it wasn't hers. Justice, it turned out, had a long shadow. She stopped Googling her name. She stopped wondering what strangers thought. Slowly, she stopped answering the questions that lived only in her own head. What if? What if? What if? There was no version of the past that changed the truth. One evening, months later, she opened TikTok again. Not to post, just to watch. The app felt smaller now, less powerful. A tool instead of a lifeline. She watched people dance, joke, cry, confess. She recognized the hunger behind some of their smiles, the need to be seen. She closed the app. Some stories she knew now didn't need an audience to be real. On the anniversary of the live stream, she took a walk alone, letting the cold air sting her lungs. She stood on a quiet bridge and watched the water move beneath her, steady, relentless, indifferent. For the first time, she didn't think about what had been taken from her. She thought about what remained, her breath, her body, her choice. The world would never give her a clean ending. There would always be people who argued about what she should have done, who deserved what, who was to blame. That noise existed without her permission and always would. But here, standing in the quiet, unnamed and unseen, she felt something close to peace. Not forgiveness, not closure, survival. She turned and walked back toward her life, carrying the truth with her, not as a spectacle, not as a headline, but as something private and hard-won. The stream had ended long ago, and for the first time, nothing else needed to go live again.